Serving in his 9th term, I recognize the member from Brown, Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm a farm kid, and back in the day when we raised hay and on the farm to feed the cattle, we used to do a lot of baling. We'd bale hay, and it wasn't with this big fancy machinery they have now. It was you lift every bale one at a time. Out in the field, you stack them on a bale rack. You put about 100 bales on a bale rack, haul them to the farm, and unload them one at a time up the bale elevator. And the guy that worked for us, his name was Ed Schloman. He was the guy that unloaded the rack. And he'd get to the end, and he'd get to the last bale, and he'd say, "Here's the bale I've been looking for." I'm the bale you've been looking for. It's an honor to follow all these fine speeches and fine people that have done great work for this state. I want to tell you a little story that goes back to before I was ever elected, when I was first thinking about running, and I had been recruited actually by my predecessor, Brad Finstead. You may have different reactions to Brad Finstead, but that's okay. He called me up and said, "Paul, would you think about running for the Minnesota legislature?" And I said yes, and the word got out. And shortly after, I got a phone call from a constituent of mine who was very interested in one particular issue. And she spent about 45 minutes with me on the telephone explaining every detail of that issue and quizzing me on whether I knew all these details. Of course, I didn't know any of them, or many of them. And I felt after I hung up the phone like I had really failed my test. And there were a lot of other people who were interested in the same office, so I had competition. And I slipped my cell phone into my shirt pocket, and I went across the house and went to the family room where my wife was sitting. And I was really frustrated, and I don't know exactly what I said. It wasn't too nasty, but it wasn't all pleasant either. And I said something about how these single-issue people can really are going to just drive me crazy, and I don't know how I'm going to handle this. And so I got my frustrations out. About a half an hour later, my cell phone rang again. It was my campaign manager. My campaign manager said, "Paul, I think your campaign might be over." I said, "Over? What do you mean?" "Paul, you forgot to hang up your phone when you went to see your wife." Wow. So I thought, well, what do I do? What do I do? And I thought, you know what? I'm going to hit this head on. I called her up. I said, "I want to come to your house, and I want to learn more about your issues." She said, "Okay." So we sat in her living room. Now, I knew that she had not hung up, and she could have hung up and not listened into my conversation. And she knew what I had said in that time after we had talked. So we're sitting there talking to each other, but we don't talk about what's in the room, really, about the telephone conversation. We just talked to each other, got to know each other, got to know the issues. Also, sometime later, it's the night of my endorsement. It was a long night. We ended up going 11 ballots. It was around the 5th or 6th or 7th ballot that I was twisting arms, trying to get a few more votes. I was so close to getting 60%. And I thought, well, maybe I can get her to vote for me, you know, if I'm really nice and ask really nice. So I went to her and I kneeled down beside her and I said, "Would you think about switching your vote to me?" And she said, "Paul, I've been voting for you since the first ballot." None of us would be here if it wasn't for the people that support us and vote for us and help us do our jobs. Voters are so important because that's why we're here. I have to share my first term. My senator was Dennis Frederickson from New Ulm, Minnesota. Dennis Frederickson served 30 years in the Minnesota Senate. 30 years, not once in the majority. The year after he quit, the Republicans took the majority in the Minnesota Senate. Pretty amazing. Dennis and his wife Marge were tremendous help to me when I was first running for office. They knew all the ropes, and they did a great job helping me get through my first campaigns. There's just so many things to talk about when you've been here as long as I have, many years now. But I'm not going to go on too long this afternoon, folks. But a few things. First, my classmates. We had a pretty good-sized class, but we're down to just a few. Myself, Paul Anderson, who skipped out, and Peggy Scott, who's here, and then the only two-time freshman, at least that I'm close friends with, Greg Davids, who came back after a little vacation from the legislature, and now he's back and most senior member of the body. So it's a great pleasure to serve with those. And a couple of other members of my class. One of them happens to be the president of the Senate, Bobby Joe Champion. And Bobby Joe and I were roommates for orientation. So we had quite a time, and we learned a lot. Jeff Hayden was also in our class. Jeff is no longer in the Senate, but of course he's lobbying, and we all see him around here quite regularly. You know, once in a while somebody will ask you, who in history would you like to sit down and have a conversation with? And one of the people I think of is Cass Gilbert. I think most of you know that Cass Gilbert, the architect of this building, I think he was a genius. I really do. This building that we serve in is so beautiful, so well put together, and so inspiring, not only to us, but to all the sixth grade kids and all the other people that come and visit this building. Just the night before last, there must have been 500 prom queens here. It was amazing. And you know, young ladies come for their quinceañeras. It's just a really inspiring place. And I was privileged to be on the Capital Investment Committee during the time that this building was being renovated. And so I could come most any time I wanted, put on a hard hat, and get a tour of the building. You know, this room, for instance, was completely filled with scaffolding, so the painters could go up on top and actually do that detailed painting that they did. Those people are so patient, and the workers that worked here during that time were so proud of the work they were doing. You could just see it in their eyes. You could just tell that they knew they were working on something very special. This Capitol, I've toured many of the capitals around the country, and ours is as beautiful or more beautiful than any. And I thank Cass Gilbert for his attention to detail. Just think what those guys did. They didn't have computers. They didn't have CAD systems. And when they built it, they didn't have these huge cranes. It was done with tools that we would laugh at today. But they did tremendous work. I had the chance to serve on as chair of the Transportation Committee right after I was chair of Capital Investment. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was a point in time where they awarded a bunch of corridors of commerce projects around the state. And it so happened that they were all connected to the metro. The rest of the state was ignored, and I was really angry. And I had it out with Charlie Zelli. I remember it was in the transportation building, and I was not at all nice to him that day. But we made up. And it's a lesson in, you know, we do have angry words here once in a while, but we don't have to hold a grudge, and we can make up, and we can continue to work even after hard times. It happens. It happens in relationships. But please don't wall yourself out from others. I went on, and when Charlie retired finally from the Metropolitan Council, I went to his retirement party over here at Union Station. It was very interesting, but I was the only Republican in the room. It was a lot a lot of Democrats, but I survived. I moved on after transportation when I've been in and out of the majority a number of times, but when it was time to do redistricting, I was the lead on our redistricting team, and some of those team members are here today. They did great work. We hired the best staff we could find, and we worked hard. And I learned a lot during that time. You know, it only happens every 10 years, so you don't have that chance to, it's not like you're building on your past experience because you don't have any. But we hired a guy who was really a whiz at the computer and handling that computer. And I'm concerned, I'm really concerned about what's going on around this country right now. We're seeing redistricting used as a political sledgehammer, and it's happening on both sides of the aisle. And I just hope and pray that we here in Minnesota aren't tempted to follow that course. I think it'd be a horrible mistake. I know it's tempting, whichever way, you know, whoever would happen to be in the majority at the time, and try to take advantage of that, it would be a true disservice to the citizens of Minnesota. Then we had a situation where I've served under a number of speakers, but where there was a change, the most recent change in speaker. And it was a surprise to me. I was a big supporter of Kurt Doubt, and I thought he was going to continue to be our speaker. Well, it didn't turn out that way. And following the decision to have a new Speaker of the House, that speaker turned to me and asked me to be her number 2. I had no idea it was coming. We didn't know each other very well at the time, and I was surprised to be asked. But I was honored, and the two of us worked together closely since then. It's been a great honor of my political career to do that, to be in the small room where decisions are made is truly an honor. Going toe-to-toe with the governor is kind of fun, actually. And I think we've done good work. Tim talked about it. This adventure we're on in a tied house is something that's never been done in the way we've done it before. I am so thrilled that we landed on a way to do this that actually works. The system of co-chairs here in the House, I think, has worked amazingly well. It's forced the workload down to the committee level, where really it should be. And everything that comes out of committee has bipartisan support. It's really amazing. I, of course, was named Chair of Ways and Means, and that put me in that small room with Zach Stevenson. And I didn't quite know what to expect. we had never really worked together either, and the one thing I remember before we did start working together is the day that he gave up and gave a great speech, and at the end of the speech he said, "Folks, this speech was written by ChatGPT." I got up and said, "Zach, that's the best speech you've ever given." But as it turned out, while we have certainly our differences, our ability to work together and try and untie the knots that develop in this tied situation proved, I think, to be valuable. I hope he does too. But I wore him out, I guess. He left Ways and Means. But he left for the worst possible reason, of course. You know, during the negotiations last year in the governor's reception room, the governor was on one side of the table. I was directly opposite from the governor. I had Lisa on my right, and I had Melissa on my left for hour after hour. Some things should just never happen. No one that serves here should have to make that sacrifice. And I hope we all understand how painful that is for the institution to see a speaker go down. Awful. So the thank you list is way too long for me to start naming names, but I'm going to name a few anyway because I kind of have to. But first, I would like to talk a little bit about Patrick Murphy. So he's been really an honor for me to work with, and I share something. I have something in or a connection with Patrick Murphy that no one else will ever have, because there was a day when I thought I had been checked out from the House floor, and I was over in Minneapolis. I was in the outskirts of Minneapolis at a meeting. And my phone rang, and it said, it's a call of the House. But I thought I was checked out. No, it's a call of the House. You better get here as quick as you can. I race down the freeway. I come running up the steps, and as I'm coming up the steps, I hear, Torkelson, Torkelson, Torkelson. I was the first person he ever called out, I believe, in that way. And from then on, for about a year and a half, every time I went into the meeting, I heard, yeah, lucky me. It's one of a long series of Torkisms around here. I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but when we were doing MnDrive, you remember MnDrive, the horrible license system that we had to get rid of and replace, took millions of dollars and a long time, finally got it done. Governor and I actually worked together to get that done. And then we had to name the new system. It's now called MnDrive, but one of the names considered was TorqueDrive. I'm a farmer, and I still have a hog barn. And that hog barn, I have an LLC because we set it up that way. The name of my LLC is Torque Chops. And there's a lot of other Torkisms. There's Torque Time, which starts at about 8:30, and I'm not going to speak quite that long, but I'm working on it. It's, the familiarity, the humor is really a good thing. Frank Hornstein and I went back and forth in transportation, and I had a rule in my committee that nobody should ever be funnier than the chair when I was chair. It was against the rules, but Frank Hornstein, he'd break the rule all the time. There's so many staff people that I worked with, partisan, nonpartisan, Republicans, Democrats. I could go on and on and on. I do have to call out my current LA, Allie, who has been amazing, brought me through some tough times. And then my family is here, my wife is here, my daughter is here, and my grandson Soren is here. Hi, Soren. And my next grandchild is here too, although she can't wave yet. I don't know how often this has happened here at the Minnesota legislature, where a legislator has a child who is a lobbyist. In my memory, it's never happened, but it's been my great privilege to serve here and work with my daughter as a lobbyist. And we've, as you noted maybe last night, getting that bill passed for tech modernization, she played a big part in it. We worked as partners, professional partners, and what a privilege to be able to do that. And then finally, last night, we saw, I think, some great work in this house. We saw the plane land. I've been here for 18 sessions. Sometimes the plane lands nicely and smoothly, and sometimes it's all hell breaks loose. I've been here for both, and I was just totally impressed. I'm going to call out a couple other staff members. First, the navigator of the plane, Jeremiah Wingstead, who was mentioned earlier. He's just brilliant and knows exactly what to do when, and knows the floor and all that stuff that I choose to ignore. Next, we have the co-pilot of the plane, Andrew Wagner, who has done a great job working with our caucus, a great job doing this thing of being tied and respecting the other side while communicating clearly, hanging on to our issues that we think are important, but recognizing the issues that are important on the other side of the aisle. And then finally, the chief pilot, Lisa Damath. Thank you for landing the plane smoothly. It doesn't always go that way. It should. Some people say that any landing you walk away from is a good landing. I would not agree with that. There have been some bad landings here, and I challenge those of you that come back to continue to have good landings. A colleague of mine, Gene Wagenius, who was my arch enemy in the Environment Committee, often said that coming to the legislature is a lot like going back to college. Now, I don't think she meant the part where we hang out at downtown or at our apartments and party a lot. I think she meant the part where we all have a lot to learn. And that is one of the most important things we as legislators must do if we're going to serve our constituents, serve the state of Minnesota well. We have to be willing to learn from each other, to learn from the lobbyists, to learn from our colleagues, to learn from our staff, both partisan and nonpartisan, to find the best path forward. We're not going to give up our values. We're not going to change our minds about what we think is important. And we're going to disagree. I've disagreed vehemently with some people here, some in my own caucus, by the way. But if you sit down and communicate and work hard often, you can find a path forward that benefits everyone. And really, that's what we're here to do. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking around, those of you that are still here. Thank you for what you do for the state of Minnesota in this beautiful facility that is such a testament to our history. I'll just end with this from Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven.